All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and this is a meeting of the joint meeting of the Communications and Planning Committee and the Program and Policy Committee. Is there a quorum present, Carla?
Yes, there's a quorum present for both the Program Policy and the Communications and Planning Committee of the board.
Okay, is there any member of the public that is there to speak? No? No? Okay.
I see none.
What, Jeremy?
I see none.
All right. We're going to reverse the order today. We have a couple of folks who had scheduling conflicts, so we're going to do the programs and planning first, I believe.
That's correct.
So, Barry?
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. John.
Barry, just one thing. The press has been notified.
Yes, Gail, that's
Carla?
yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, Barry, to interrupt.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. We're going to start out with the Programs and Policy Committee. Wendy is probably lead us in most of this. So we're going to talk about how KHC will deploy Home America Plan funds. So Wendy, take it away if you're on.
Thanks, Barry, and good afternoon, board members and staff. Believe it or not, I actually won't speak during most of this. I'll just tee it off and hand it off. The two things we are bringing to you all are related, and it's why we're bringing them together. The first is how KHC is going to deploy what's called Home ARP, which is funding from HUD through the American Rescue Plan Act. These are funds we typically get about $12 to $13 million in regular home formula allocation funds every year and use them across multiple housing programs. We have a one-time, very unique and prescribed use of funds through the American Rescue Plan Act of almost $52 million. So it's wildly more than we typically get, and it's really focused on a specific set of eligible tenants and uses of funds. And I'm going to have Curtis talk about that in just a moment. And then you will have Sam presenting to you all our qualified allocation plan, which we do every year, or every 2 years, excuse me, to kind of lay out our approach to allocating low-income housing tax credits. We have been, Curtis Stopper and his folks and Sam have been working together on thinking about these Home ARP funds and how they relate to the QAP. The QAP is bigger than just this home allocation and how we're going to use that, but they are related. So we wanted to bring them to you all together. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Curtis Stopper, who is the Managing Director over Housing Contract Administration and has been involved with our Home ARP planning since we learned about the money. So Curtis, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate your time. And I'm really excited to be able to share the opportunity that this unique funding stream provides to Kentucky Housing Corporation, our partners in the balance of state, continuum of care, and other homeless service providers serving the other continuums of care, and developers willing to step up and create more permanent supportive housing units in the Commonwealth to serve our most vulnerable residents. So give me just a moment, I'll be sharing my screen to show PowerPoint. Create more permanent supportive housing units in the Commonwealth to serve our most vulnerable residents. Give me just a moment. Can you all see the title screen? Fantastic. First, I'll begin by giving a quick overview of funding and eligible activities for the Home Investment Partnerships American Rescue Plan Act funding, or what we refer to as Home ARP. As Wendy stated, the American Rescue Plan Act allocated to the balance of state of Kentucky $52.5 million in funding when the American Rescue Plan Act was passed. We're not the only people to receive funding through this allocation. Other participating jurisdictions receiving funding were Louisville at $11.4 million, Lexington at $4.8 million, Owensboro at $1 million, and the Covington Consortium, which serves multiple counties in northern Kentucky, is a little over $2 million. These funds have to be obligated by September 30th, 2025, and fully spent by September 30th, 2030 to avoid recapture from our friends at HUD. And there's a limited array of eligible activities these funds can be used for. One is tenant-based rental assistance. Two, and most importantly in our mind, is the development and support of affordable housing units. It also supports, although with some fairly onerous regulatory guidelines, which I'll explain in a little later, the acquisition and creation of non-congregate shelter units, which have become more of a priority as we've tried to help people experiencing homelessness during the pandemic when more traditional congregate shelter settings are unsafe and undesirable. It also provides supportive services, up to 15% to cover a grantee's administrative costs, and up to 10% for nonprofit capacity building or nonprofit operating grants to help them meet the goals of this program. There's a very specific eligible population for these funds. In order to qualify for assistance with units and or activities supported by home ARP dollars, somebody must be either homeless or experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, and then folks who we have identified as being at the greatest risk of housing instability, and we did that via an amendment to the consolidated plan, whereby we identified that population as those folks who are very low income, who are expending a portion of their incomes, 50% or more on housing, and also are living in unsafe or unstable housing units, utilizing some other home definitions of unstable housing. And while these are the basic eligible groups, the legislation was sure to emphasize that veterans were to be highlighted and targeted who fell within these eligible categories. So, as Wendy also mentioned, this is a one-time grant. This is not renewable funding. This is not going to come back to us again. And it really does present a tremendous opportunity to create more permanent resources that can serve folks experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And because of the great opportunity this provided, as soon as we were alerted of the availability of these funds, we got moving on planning work, even though it took our friends at HUD many months to release the regulatory guidance for these dollars. So for example, the Rescue Plan Act was passed in March of last year, but we did not get guidance on the use of these funds until September from HUD. So there's a significant gap in which we really couldn't do a whole lot, but we knew we had to get ahead of the game in order to best use these funds in an effective and efficient manner. So as a result, we had three main KHC departments involved in this planning effort. Mine, Housing Contract Administration, particularly our Homeless Programs Division, the multifamily programs team, and corporate planning and accountability, helping us with the financial planning and interactions with HUD. But importantly, we also brought in a consultant. I apologize for the dog. Give me 1 second. Continued COVID environment. We made the decision early on to use an RFP to seek a consultant to help us utilize these funds that had expertise in the creation of permanent supportive housing units, the administration of permanent supportive housing units, and providing supportive services for persons experiencing homelessness. And through that process, we selected the Corporation for Supportive Housing, and they were able to hit the ground running with us. We issued that RFP in June and had them under contract in August, and they helped us with preliminary planning work. So as soon as the HUD regulations were released, we were ready to go with the outreach and planning efforts necessary to submit an action plan to HUD. So, a little background on our friends at CSH. They've been doing this work since 1991 and are widely recognized as the nation's leading expert on permanent supportive housing to serve those experiencing homelessness. And they've worked all across the country and have active efforts in 48 states, including one of their main technical support efforts, whereby they offer supportive housing academies in a number of states to help developers, their supportive services partners, and their property managers create really strong and, most importantly, financially sustainable proposals for permanent supportive housing developments. As I mentioned, we procured them by competitive RFP in June of last year, specifically to conduct a supportive housing needs assessment. And we had already worked with them in a prior effort for the Balance of State Continuum of Care to have preliminary data on that. One that was able to let us expedite that process because they basically had to add on to work they'd already done for us in the past. They were tasked with drafting our Hallmark allocation plan, helping us consult with key stakeholders on the uses of Hallmark funds, creating our own supportive housing institute, and to provide continued policy administrative guidance to Kentucky Housing Corporation, the Balance of State Continuum of Care, and the developer and social service partners we'll be working with for the administration of these funds. And we were able to do outreach at 26 key stakeholder groups in September and early October of last year. And those groups included local governments, the other continuum of care, and our continuum of care, homeless services providers, other state agencies, including the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, the Department for Medicaid Services, and the Department for Veteran Affairs. And also, we had a focus group of persons who have a history of experiencing homelessness to get their input on how we should prioritize the use of these funds. Obviously, given the great need we have to serve our most vulnerable residents in the state, all the key stakeholders thought all the eligible activities would be great if we could utilize those funds to meet all those needs, but they had definitely prioritized the creation of new affordable supportive housing units as a top priority. Additionally, there's a lot of nervousness amongst both the homeless services providers and developers for the challenges faced in creating new PSH units, particularly ensuring their operational and economic stability. We haven't seen very many units of supportive housing created in the past here in Kentucky. And those that have, unfortunately, we have seen them operating at a loss, having to be subsidized by the organizations that created them due to some, shall we say, flawed financial pro forma developing and operational cost analysis in their initial creation. Most of the respondents also agreed that we really needed to ensure that a good portion of these funds went to the balance of the state of Kentucky, where we have seen little to no development of supportive housing units in the past. There was a couple of groups that identified the need for some non-congregate shelters, and I will talk a little bit about that when we talk about the specific allocation. But unfortunately, our friends at HUD have made the use of these funds for that purpose very, very challenging. So, where are we now? We were the very first state in the country to have our action plan approved by HUD, which we sort of learned by surprise during a NCSHA home webinar earlier in January before HUD had notified us officially. But we did get formal notification last week that our action plan was approved, and we now have access to the full amount of Hallmark funding from HUD. So we're excited about that. Another bit of great news, as you'll hear more from Sam shortly, in our qualified allocation plan, for the first time in many years, we've done a permanent supportive housing set aside to encourage developers to seek these Hallmark funds used in conjunction with other broader affordable housing development resources. And just earlier this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we had the very first session launched for the Supportive Housing Institute with 6 developer teams participating. And we were really excited about that. Initially, we were concerned we would have even enough applicants to fill the slots that we had available, which CSH limited to 5 to 6 teams, depending on the size of the applicant team. We had 11 applicants for these Supportive Housing Academy resources, which is really, really great news. We're seeing that level of interest from our developers and their services partners. So we are thrilled to have that level of interest from the development community and are excited to be able to offer the Institute again next year as we continue to fund CSH to do that work based on their successful RFP. So we are thrilled that this is going forward and are excited to see what proposals will be coming from the Supportive Housing Academy later this year once they complete the application and proposal development process under the guidance of CSH. So this is how we've decided to allocate the funding available through Hallmark. As you can see, the vast majority of the funding available will be used for rental housing development. a little over $36.5 million. We've reserved a small amount for nonprofit capacity building, and that's going to help some of the development teams, if they need it, seek consulting services or develop capacity to help them identify and use other funding streams to ensure the ongoing financial sustainability of their programs, including billing Medicaid for supportive services. We've got our allowable. We've decided to take 10% of the funds, not up to the full 15 for administrative and planning services to support our costs in administering these funds. We also have $7.5 million in supportive services. And with that, we are utilizing $6 million specifically to be targeted to support the units that are going to be developed with these funds to ensure they have supportive housing operating budgets to help them get started. This is not funding that will be able to sustain the supportive services throughout the lifetime of these units that will be developed. But we know as we work to create new funding streams that might be available to service providers, including some Medicaid reforms that the Department for Medicaid Services is going to be proposing later this year, we probably will need some gap funding to ensure that these developments can get started on paying for their services while they develop capacity to bill other streams, including Medicaid, to pay for them on a permanent basis. Additionally, from that supportive services stream, we've allocated about $1.5 million to continue funding street outreach services that we've been able to provide as a result of the CARES Act Emergency Solutions Grant funding. One thing that we've been, in the balance of state, that we've provided the opportunity to do due to the significant emergency rental assistance 2 funding also provided by the Rescue Plan Act is continue to provide rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention services that were funded by the ESG CV or ESG CARES program. And those funds expire in September of this year. So when we reach the end of the ESG CV funding period, we're going to be able to continue to provide, using emergency rental assistance funding, rapid rehousing across the entirety of the balance of state, which was the first time we've ever accomplished that. And a key element in utilizing these available homelessness assistance resources is identifying folks who are experiencing homelessness. And unfortunately, in the vast majority of the balance of state, we've had a huge gap and lack of street outreach. And in rural areas and smaller communities, this is vitally important because there aren't a lot of traditional shelter resources. So you find many people living in barns, wooded areas, or other places unfit for human habitation. So we're going to be able to continue to fund the street outreach efforts initiated by the ESG CARES program, utilizing a small portion of our Home ARP dollars, which was a use that was explicitly encouraged in the Home ARP guidance issued by HUD in September. You will also see we've got about $2 million set aside to support the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. And given the need we have for increased shelter capacity in the state, you might be asking yourselves, well, why aren't we paying for more of this? I'm going to tell you. The way HUD initially talked about the use of these funds prior to issuing their regulatory guidance was citing a lot of examples, particularly in California and Colorado, where local communities have acquired hotels and motels and converted them on a short-term basis to non-congregate shelter to serve people during the pandemic, with a goal of then converting those units to permanent supportive housing after the pandemic was over. So we thought that we'd be seeing opportunities to provide short-term solutions for non-congregate shelter while also increasing the availability of permanent supportive housing units. Unfortunately, when they issued the regulations for these funds, HUD made a 10-year use requirement for non-congregate shelter, prohibited the use of using Home ARP funds to create a conversion to permanent supportive housing, and also mandated that you demonstrate that you have operating support for these funds for the duration of the compliance period, which you cannot use Home ARP to pay operating costs for shelters. So through our outreach to some partners that were interested, particularly in this non-congregate shelter, we made it very clear that if you were going to be seeking to utilize the small amount of funding we've set aside for this purpose, they need to demonstrate a 10-year commitment of operating funds in order to utilize these funds for non-congregate shelter conversion or development. And we do believe we will receive 1 to 3 proposals from partners that have that capability, particularly domestic violence shelter in Owensboro and a homeless shelter in Whitley County. But we will be launching that program via our homeless programs team. sorry, wrong way. My apologies. So again, we're going to be working in 3 main avenues with this. Rental housing development. That'll be administered by Sam's team in multifamily. And we plan on issuing home ARP funds in the 22, 23, and 24 cycles, or if we utilize them all beforehand until that point, to get these home ARP funds allocated in conjunction with 9% credits, 4% credits, or as a standalone non-competitive round, possibly also in conjunction with traditional home formula funding or state affordable housing trust fund dollars. We will also be funding supportive services. As I said, those funds will be targeted primarily to support the services being provided in the units to be developed, as well as to continue the street outreach efforts funded through the Emergency Solutions Grant CARES program. And we'll also be having, as discussed, our small amount of funding to support a couple non-congregate shelter conversions. And we really hope this will have a number of impacts for us. First off, we're going to be able to create new supportive housing units as a result of these investments. Based on the projections from our friends at CSH, they think we're going to be able to create at least 300 units of new supportive housing as a result of these investments with Home ARP and the other funds the Home ARP dollars will leverage. We are going to ensure these new units are going to serve those most in need by requiring referrals from our continuum of care coordinated entry systems. And that will be the case if we use KHC dollars. In the balance of state, it will come from the balance of state continuum of care, or in Louisville or Lexington, it will come from those continuum of care's coordinated entry systems as well. One great thing about Home ARP dollars that is very unique to our housing development funding streams is we do have the ability, if needed, to create operating reserves to ensure the financial sustainability, at least for the first 15 years of operations of these units utilizing Home ARP dollars. We are basically going to try to use these funds as a break it in case of emergency effort, because we're hoping to provide ways to link project-based rental assistance to the units that are going to be developed, including utilizing some KHC resources under our Tenant Assistance programs, such as mainstream vouchers or emergency housing vouchers. So there are opportunities, we hope, to ensure we have permanent rental subsidies that can be tied to the units that be developed, but we do have the ability to fund operating costs reserves if need be. But more importantly, we view this home ARP investment as a chance to create the capacity and demonstrate the successful implementation of permanent supportive housing development in the Commonwealth. We haven't done it right here. We don't know how to do it right here. And this is an opportunity to demonstrate not only to our homeless service provider partners throughout the balance of state and in Louisville and Lexington, that it can be done, but also show our development community that it can be done, it can be successful, and it can be economically sustainable. We want to encourage them to do this. As I mentioned to the first participants in our supportive housing academy program earlier today, we're viewing them as the canaries in the coal mine, and we want them to be able to fly and fly high. So this is a really great opportunity for us to show that permanent supportive housing can work, that we can create economically sustainable models for serving those most at risk in the Commonwealth and help us getting closer to meeting the goal of ending homelessness in the state. Again, we're not going to be having any preferences as allowed by HUD, although we do plan to target and prioritize those experiencing homelessness as a nature of the referrals coming from the coordinated entry system. And we also want to ensure that developments do occur in the balance of state where there was a great need identified as a result of outreach. And if anybody has any questions regarding this program, our partnership with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, or where we think we're going, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this proposal.
Your proposal, Curtis. Now, Sam, I think you're wanting to go through, or Wendy, do you have anything else, other comments or anything before we move over to Sam?
Only that we are really proud not just to be the first state to submit our plan and get it approved, which means we'll be the first to get access to our funds, but that we're trying to think about these one-time funds to address long-standing gaps in our housing delivery system.
Great.
I just want to say there's a national movement for investment philanthropy, exactly, in investing in the nonprofits and their operation. And so when you start with that, I'd love to hook you up with that national movement, because certainly philanthropic contributions can be to the organization's stability can be useful.
Kathy, that would be great, particularly as this Permanent Supportive Housing Institute moves along and Corporation for Supportive Housing works with each team, which involves a nonprofit. That would be really, really great.
Is there any other comments we want to make on Curtis's presentation? Well, I guess hearing none, Sam, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share my screen here. Can you all see? Great.
Yes, perfect.
So my name is Sam Corner. I'm the Managing Director of Multifamily Programs, and today I'm going to be presenting the 2023-2024 Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Qualified Allocation Plan. So first, I'm going to kind of go over the LIHTC program a little bit. Tax credits are allocated to the state HFAs from the IRS. This is an IRS program. And the allocation of those credits is based on population. So based on current population levels and the multiplier that the IRS has right now, we will get approximately $11.65 million annually under the 9% LIHTC program. KHC then establishes housing priorities and competitive award process via the QAP, and that's what we're discussing today. The QAP has to comply with Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. When we award these tax credits to developers for the development of affordable housing projects, they use the tax credits to raise equity capital from investors for developments. So investors will pay to get access to the tax credits, and that money is used as equity to the project to leverage with the debt and create the budget for the project. Tax credits are claimed over a 10-year period, but properties must maintain affordability for 30 years. And the tax credits are subject to recapture for noncompliance. So that's a general overview of how the tax credit program works. And last year, we received 33 applications and requests for $34 million in tax credits. And based on the availability of funding, we were only able to award 13 projects and $12 million in tax credits. So this is a very competitive and limited resource. And the purpose of the QAP is to help us select which projects we fund based on the criteria that are outlined in the QAP. So the low-income housing tax credit program requires each HFA to have a qualified allocation plan, which outlines the criteria and the policies and eligibility requirements and establishes a scoring system to determine which projects are funded. And we typically update this annually or biannually. We've been doing a 2-year QAP over the last few years, and we found that that works best. And the most recent QAP was approved by the board of directors in December in 2020. So some of the goals and challenges that we have for this QAP, we solicit feedback from developers, partners, and stakeholders. We've held 2 developer forums virtually for the first time, thanks to the pandemic, in November and January, and we held a virtual public hearing earlier this month. And we also received written comments and feedback throughout the process from the developers and various stakeholders. We also want to use data to establish scoring elements that incentivize certain project characteristics, including the location of new construction projects. We want to make sure that we're distributing housing credits across the Commonwealth and maintaining a 2-year QAP cycle. The main challenge that we face this year is that we normally use data from the U.S. Census Bureau to create data-driven scoring criteria, but the U.S. Census Bureau has significantly delayed the release of their 5-year ACS data, citing issues due to the pandemic. So rather than delaying the issuance of the QAP, we opted to proceed with the data that we had available, substituting with alternate reliable data sources where we could, such as the U.S. Social Security Administration. So that's one of the challenges that we faced, but we felt that it was better to move forward with the data that we had and not delay the issuance of the QAP. So some of the key elements for the QAP, the pools are separated, and competition for LIHTC is divided into 4 separate scoring pools so that projects only compete against similar projects. So the first pool is new construction or the creation of new supply projects. This pool includes a preference for historic adaptive reuse projects, and urban and rural projects within this pool compete separately. So urban projects compete with urban projects and rural with rural. We also have a pool for the preservation or rehabilitation of existing affordable housing units. And again, urban and rural projects compete separately in this pool. The third pool that we have, and this is the innovation pool, this is for projects that might not score well based on the criteria that we have, but they offer unique housing solutions, and KHC these projects are not scored. KHC has a discretion to select these projects from among the projects that apply. And then again, this year we are adding back the nonprofit permanent supportive housing pool, like Curtis was discussing. The purpose of this is to leverage the home ARP dollars that we received from HUD to create permanent supportive housing units. Another important element of the QAP is that 10% of the credits must be awarded to projects in which a nonprofit is materially participating as defined by the IRS code. So here you can see, this is a screenshot from the QAP, and it breaks down the tax credits by pool. Again, the new construction, new supply pool has a preference for historic adaptive reuse project. The maximizing outcomes pool, also it includes credits that are left over from the other pools, and it's used mainly to ensure that we are able to meet the goals of the QAP, such as funding at least one project in each congressional district and ensuring that 10% of the credits are awarded to nonprofits. The amount of tax credits listed here is an estimate. It's based on last year's calculation. The final amount will be issued by the IRS each year, and it's based on the population of Kentucky. So I'm going to go through the scoring items. There weren't a lot of changes from last year. A lot of it was just tweaking and adjusting scoring items that we already had. So for all projects, we look at whether the development team has the capacity to complete the project. So we want to make sure that these projects are done well and that the team that is building them has the capacity to do so. We also look at whether the management team that's going to be involved in the project will support long-term sustainability. So we look at the other projects that the management team has managed in the state of Kentucky, and we, in combination with our asset management team, have created a scoring criteria that is allocated to each asset management organization, and that is used in the scoring criteria. And then finally, we look at to what extent will disadvantaged businesses be participating. So KHC has long incentivized the participation of disadvantaged businesses in our QAP. Over the last few years, we've been evaluating our internal and external operations with the goal of making KHC as inclusive as possible for our staff, customers, and partners. And so in light of this goal, for this QAP, we decided to weight the participation of disadvantaged businesses differently, placing a higher point value on disadvantaged businesses that are participating in the role of developer or co-developer. And we require that those designations be from state resources, from state organizations. So all of that's outlined in the scoring item. For the preservation and rehabilitation pool, we look at how long it's been since the last substantial rehabilitation. For this particular scoring item, we added a tier to allow projects that have had over 31 years since their last substantial rehab to receive an additional point. We look at which projects are in the greatest need of rehab. So our design and construction team goes out and evaluates all of the existing supply applicants and ranks them based on which projects have the greatest need. And the projects with the greatest need are the ones that get the higher point value. We also look at whether the project is at risk of losing rental assistance or at risk of being lost from the affordable housing stock, due to ownership issues or market conditions, and we incentivize and we place a priority on those projects. And then finally, for rural projects, we look at whether the project represents a significant number of total affordable units in the county. For the new supply pool, we use a different set of criteria. So the first thing that we look at is the project located in an area of opportunity? And for this, we use the Opportunity 360 tool. This was developed by enterprise community partners and evaluates various measures of opportunity at a census tract level. It gathers data points related to factors and amenities in a particular community that indicate the strength of certain traits like housing stability, economic security, and education, and generates a score for a particular census tract. Enterprise decided to end the tool at the end of last year, but they've agreed to continue providing us with the data for the next 2 years. And we'll be evaluating other methods of determining what constitutes an area of opportunity for future QAPs, but for this cycle, we're going to keep this scoring item in place. The next thing we look at is demand. Is there a significant demand for affordable housing in the county? And for that, we look at the percentage of households that are at or below 60% AMI. We also look at the supply side. Is there a low supply in the county of affordable units? And we incentivize projects in counties that have a lower supply. For affordable developments serving families, projects can receive points either for being in a county with a high potential for job growth or in a county that has not had a high-tech project awarded in the last 10 years. In the last QAP, we focused on population growth rather than the distribution of credits to counties that have not had a recent LIHTC award. However, for this QAP, we decided to focus on equal distribution of credits throughout the state. For senior projects, we looked at projects in areas that have a high number of seniors or with projects that have aging in place design features. As I mentioned earlier, we have issues with gathering data from the Census Bureau, so we use data from the Social Security Administration for this scoring item. We felt that the Social Security Administration data would be just as reliable in terms of determining which counties had high senior populations. So that's what we went with. We also look at if a project is located in an urban QCT, qualified census tract, does that community have a revitalization plan? And then finally, does the project support poverty deconcentration and affirmatively further into housing? One item I'd like to note is that this year we removed a scoring item that incentivized urban projects in census tracts that had lower poverty rates. While the scoring item is one that furthered the goals of deconcentrating poverty, the lack of the 5-year census data coupled with recent changes to census tracts made it necessary for us to remove this scoring item. But we do expect that it will return once the necessary census data is available in the next QAP cycle. For the innovation pool, as I mentioned earlier, we do not score this pool. This was established to create a way for worthwhile projects to be considered even though they did not score well in the other two pools. Sometimes this includes smaller projects that offer unique services or important amenities, and KHC has discretion to select projects from these pools. We have all of the applicants who wish to be considered for this pool present us with their projects, and there's a committee of KHC staff that make the selections. Nonprofits permanent supportive housing pool is new this year, as Curtis so eloquently discussed. Under the American Rescue Plan, we received the one-time allocation of home ARP funds, and we decided to reintroduce this separate nonprofit permanent supportive housing pool to leverage the home ARP funds with tax credits to finance the creation of permanent supportive housing units. This pool will allow these permanent supportive housing projects to be funded separately without competing with other projects. These applications will not be scored. We're going to be soliciting the input of relevant stakeholders, and we have discretion to determine which projects have the highest likelihood of long-term success and will provide the most benefit to the Commonwealth. The timeline for the QAP is we had the public hearing on February 3rd, and we had about a week for the public comment period. And then after this meeting today, we will be presenting the QAP to the full board of directors next week. Once that is approved, it will need to be signed by the governor's office. And then we will hopefully open the applications in May of 2022. We will receive applications by August of 2022, and then we will make funding awards under this QAP in January of 2023. So thank you so much for your time, and we're asking that this committee recommend to the full board approval of the 2023-24 state qualified allocation plan for the low-income housing tax credit program. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Great presentation again. So, actually, I was hoping you could beat Curtis out as a competition, but I think it was 1A, 1A. So great job, both of you. Any questions on Sam's presentation? So hearing none, I think it's about time to hand it back over to the Chairwoman Lively, and let's go with the adjournment here on the list, and just skip yours altogether. But I think we can go back up to number 2.
All right, we ready? The Communications and Planning Committee monitors the progress toward our corporate strategic goals. And it sure has been, I believe, 2 years since this committee has met. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you all John Davidson. If you haven't met John, he's the Deputy Executive Director, and he is going to present our Q2 updates on the corporation's strategies and from our committee. So, John?
Can I just shift? I thought Sam wanted us to vote so that when it went to the board, it went to the board with a...
Oh, I thought we did.
I don't remember voting. Do you guys remember voting?
No, we did.
I remember not having a question.
No.
And Curtis, do you need that also? The recommendation of this committee to then...
I don't believe so, but I'll defer to my supervisor. Wendy?
We do not need the committee to make a motion on the home ARP, but we do need one for the QAP to recommend it to the larger board.
Okay. So if we do that, then
I'd be happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
So all those opposed? Motion passes. So we will present that to the board. Thank you for catching that. So Chairperson Lively, I'll turn it back over to you.
Just always jumping ahead.
Always.
Always jumping ahead. Okay. So John, John, would you take it away, please, from here?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Lively. Good afternoon, members of the board. It's good to be with you on this Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to share my screen, and as Chair Lively indicated, that I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things. One of which is our planning process for the corporation, so that you're aware of it and understand which committees do what of the board. And then secondly, I'm going to give you an update through the second quarter of fiscal year 22 on where we are with our current corporate strategies. Happy to entertain any questions. Just before I get started, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to continue to move forward and make sure that my screen is changing here. So, sorry. One more time. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is John Davidson. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Business Services and responsible for overseeing the annual corporate planning process. One of the things I want to make sure to address, especially for those that have not been part of the board, or as Chair Lively indicated, it's been a couple of years since we've convened. So our annual corporate planning process by board committee, the overarching strategies are reviewed by the Communications and Planning Committee. The allocation plan, which we'll come back to you in May with, and every 2 years, as Sam laid out in his time frame, the QAP are reviewed by the Programs and Policy Committee, and they are reviewed and approved by the board of the directors. And then the operating budget, which is part of our planning process, is reviewed by the Finance Committee and approved by the full board, typically in May. So I want to put a couple of time frames around what we're doing with our planning and what the purpose is, and talk about each section before I talk about our progress. The first thing I will say is that the strategy and business planning portion of this is we're kicking it off internally in the corporation with our executive management team, deputies, and we established the strategic direction and specific goals for the corporation for each department. That is going to be going on and has already started and going through the end of March. And then moving down to the allocation planning, we typically do that in the month of April. And you can imagine the influx of COVID dollars. You will see those reflected in the new allocation plan, but also in our new corporate strategies that we will bring back to you in May, because the allocation plan determines how we align our financial resources and how we will invest those across the state by program. Last but certainly not least, the operating budget is done and presented in May. It's worked on starting now and through the month of May to make sure everything we want to do and we say we're going to do, that we have allocation and resources and dollars to do that. So those should all be aligned and are done in conjunction together by our corporate planning and accountability department. So the last thing I will mention is this ongoing reporting, in which we measure and monitor key metrics. I'm going to talk to you about a few of those today on a quarterly basis, and internally, and really on a monthly basis as well. And then we present this update to the board of directors in the Communications and Planning Committee semi-annually. So we will convene again in May to look at our new strategies and report on, you're going to hear a report today on our current strategies, and then again typically in August. So I just want to share that with you and lay out some really specific descriptions of timelines, purpose, and how each board committee is involved. So that sort of transitions me to the pivot where we're going to look at how we're doing in accordance with our fiscal 22 overarching strategies. So for those of you all that I think you should have received a packet, the packet was the fiscal 22 overarching strategies. There are 4 of those. I'm not going to read every one of these, but I am going to kind of give you an overview of each of those. The first is serving with a purpose, and and what that means is our missional components. Our work matters. We want to be a collaborative and empathetic partner. We want to communicate the value of our work, and I think you saw that certainly with Curtis's presentation, and obviously the collaboration and input in the QAP process. So that's really what we are wanting to do and what we set out to do. So strategy 1, serve with a purpose, is our missional component and of what we do. The second one is provide holistic housing solutions, specifically to continue operating our programs proficiently. We operate a number of programs across a number of line of businesses and departments, and we want to continue to do that proficiently. And then you will see some discussion in both in how we're doing currently with our COVID administration, relief programs, but also how that plays into next year. But we are mitigating the impact of our COVID-19 program on our partners and programs. And as you can imagine, we've received almost $500 million, the state of Kentucky. So it's phenomenal, the amount of dollars, but also the amount of impact we can make. And we want to make sure we're both managing and mitigating that. Obviously, we want to align all of our programs, make sure we're having optimal impact. There's a certain level of thoughtfulness that I think hopefully you will see through this process, and sort of strategic nature. Also, last but not least, utilizing data and analytics to shape our policy and decision making. So use information to make informed decisions. Number 3 is being flexible and responding to financial risk. I'm going to talk a little bit about that one specifically. We want to look at consider opportunities to maybe grow our mission economically. Again, you'll see that sort of repeated, that COVID-19 impact. It has been a very large financial, sort of staffing, but also impactful program. And I'm going to talk to you a little more about that in a couple of slides here. And then we want to optimize the utilization of our available admin dollars. So for all these programs, we get administrative dollars and fees, which is how we administer those programs. We want to make sure that we are optimizing the use of that and gathering all of those dollars to administer these programs in the best way we can. And then number 3, look into the horizon. But before we can look into the horizon, we need to identify and evaluate any limiting factors for our programs that we currently operate. So again, these are examples of being flexible and providing financial risk, or responding to financial risk. Number 4 is near and dear to my heart. Not that all of them are not, but sustain and advance core competencies. In business services, I really want to make sure we are executing our succession planning and looking at key positions and make sure we have a strong bench for folks and to continue the good work of the corporation. Documenting our processes for cross-training and the evolving workforce. Retaining and recruiting exceptional talent, and then investing in technology. This marks next month almost 2 years of a remote and work environment. So we have the technology in place to support that, and we were able to send everyone home almost seamlessly. And the last one near and dear to my heart is 4E, continuing diversity and equity and inclusion efforts. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that specifically and how we're doing on a couple of key metrics related to that. But those are our strategies. Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, there's in Jefferson County at income level of $40,000 to $50,000 a year. 66% of white households own compared to 34% of Black households and 17% of Hispanic households. At income of $60,000 to $75,000, 72% of white households own compared to 48% of Black households and 36% of Hispanic households. After decades, KHC has some responsibility for this disparity. Absolutely. And so I don't see in here, I don't see it in here. Sure. Taking responsibility and saying we've got to understand why, and we have to change that and specifically be about making sure there's equity. And I'm sure in other counties we can look and see similar things by race and ethnicity, but we might also see that by having a disability or being a female-headed household. I don't see that in any of these strategies or as a really important part. So I gotta be honest and we bear responsibility. We've been in business that long.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Kathy. So this is the current year, and what I will tell you is those discussions are currently going on to make sure that we are looking at the key metrics related to minority home ownership and things of that nature. So what I will tell you is we're looking back, and some of those key metrics related to diversity and equity and inclusion by program and things of that nature, we are discussing that and really trying to pinpoint the key pieces so that we can include those and move forward and report on those items. So that's why you don't see them historically, but in these. So we're looking backward. Does that answer your question or address your concerns?
Yeah, that it will be in the next set of strategies.
Right, and so you'll start to see some of this furthering of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and some of the key metrics that we are looking at as a corporation.
And I also don't see development of partnerships outside of KHC to further these goals, which I think is imperative and necessary to achieving these goals.
100%, those go hand in hand, and going forward in the fiscal 23 strategies, we're crafting them, and we are fine tuning them to be a little more specific and precise, is what I will say, to address some of those. So, okay. Thank you.
And Kathy, let me just add, it depends upon what level of the document and the planning process some of these things appear. I mean, what you're speaking to is rather precise, and the document that we're looking at now is a much more general document. But your question goes to more to at what level do we address the specifics that you've raised, and how's it dealt with? And that's an ongoing matter that we're looking at, and I mean, you've raised it in a conversation that we had just this past week, and we're continuing to talk about it internally in terms of what are our capabilities, what are our resources, and how to achieve that, and as well as other specific goals that need to be achieved by the corporation. So
I guess I'm not communicating well, because it isn't just how do we change this number. It's our ethos needs to be about equity. When we say we serve with purpose, I need to see equity in there. It needs to be inculcated into the basic values of KHC and reflected in those things. Not that the people at KHC don't have those values, they do. I'm saying this guiding document needs to reflect that ethos.
Well, and maybe I'm not communicating effectively either. If so, I apologize. I think there has been, by at least the people in the organization, a long-term commitment to equity, and I believe that is present today, and I think we will see it expressed in at least in a general way in the document that John is discussing the current version of, not the future version of, and then to what extent the precise numbers, the precise goals as you've articulated them end up appearing in various documents is a matter in progress. Yep. Okay, on.
Excellent. All right. If you all are okay with it.
John, I think Gail's speaking.
I'm sorry.
Gail's got to mute that down. John and I have been discussing, Kathy, some of the numbers that were reflected in your concerns, and those numbers most likely, and I would hope John's done a marvelous job. And I think some of the numbers and some of these things will change as we go along and continue to prepare some of the strategies that have been mentioned. So believe me, we've discussed them in the with the committee and with John ad infinitum. and John's in the process and maybe has already prepared some of those numbers from our Kentucky counties. So just wanted to say he's on it.
Thank you, Gail. And that's a nice segue into the second purpose of sort of where we are and reporting how we're doing and giving some numbers around what we said we were going to do at the beginning of the fiscal year. So thank you for that, Chair Lally, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to sort of pivot and continue to go through this PowerPoint here, or this presentation, and talk a little bit about where we are and how we're doing. But before I do that, the intent here is not for you to see every single detail. I've got them extracted a little more. So the intent for everyone's edification is to let you know that the outcomes in which we say we are going to or strive to achieve get measured through something called a scorecard at the departmental level. And there are key metrics that are set out at the beginning of the year that are targets and for the fiscal year. And then we report on those quarterly and by department and review those and talk about those and understand why and how. And then again, semi-annually with the board. So every department, this is an example of where we are. There's some financial metrics, there's some programmatic metrics, and there's some business operation metrics that are extracted by department. And so this next slide is a couple of key things that I really wanted to bring to your attention and to make everyone aware of. So the first thing that I will say, this really spans across all of the organization and all of the corporation by department. So the first thing I will say is in our loan servicing area, we have 902 loans per employee. And that's exceeding our target of 850, which is sort of a benchmark industry. Jim works with his team on that. So 902 per employee, that's kudos to the loan servicing team. Single family, which is also under the purview of our chief financial officer. We have had $289 million in loan production. We set out to have loan production of $450 million. That's 64% to date. And I will not get into the intricacies or woes of the seasonal nature of mortgage production because I'm certainly not an expert in that. So, but we also in the finance area have almost $12 million in secondary market trade gains. So I wanted to share that information and news, and certainly more to come on that, I think, at the February board meeting. The next thing is there's $241,000 in revenue for inspection fees, and a big kudos to the tenant assistance staff on this. But achieving a standard performer, I'm certainly not going to speak for Wendy and her areas on this, but that's a big deal because it impacts several things: our dollars received, our vouchers leased. There's a lot of impact and helping the number of people we can help. So I just wanted to acknowledge tenant assistance. We have over 4,600 households served through the various homeless programs across HCA, which Curtis Stauffer, who you heard from earlier, is speaking about or spoke about. Our target was to assist 5,500. We are over 80%, 84% there. So again, a lot of that has to do with rounds and timing and things of that nature. But we're really achieving and ahead of schedule on some of those items. As we move down, 1,200 units created with tax-exempt bonds. We set out to preserve or create over 1,500 was the target for the fiscal year, so we're 80% there. And the QAP discussion and all of those discussions, hopefully you see where these things tie together. And again, I'll say the integrated nature of that. So our communications department has worked tirelessly to try to figure out ways to celebrate our 50th anniversary in the midst of a continued pandemic. So we are celebrating our 50th year in 2022. The corporation was created in 1972, but just a huge kudos, and we want to acknowledge the existence and the work of our founder, May Street Kid, as well. So one of the other things that I want to mention is the KHC minority representation of 14.85%. So this gets to a couple of things that Chair Lively was talking about, and certainly Winston, and maybe can address a couple of questions you have, Kathy. But so looking back to 2018, gone back almost 4 years, and didn't go back further than that, but certainly can. But this is the highest minority representation Kentucky Housing Corporation has had in those 4 years, and I would presume to say maybe in the history of the corporation. So that is one thing that we are tracking, and that is one thing we are monitoring, and that is one thing that we are that you will see a little more of an emphasis on giving a little more precise information around that, because that 14.5% exceeds the 13% statewide housing minority rate based on 2019 ACS data. No more recent data is not available, as you heard from the QAP, right? The COVID has caused an issue with the census delaying a lot of this. So, but I just want to share that, and there's a couple of reasons that I really wanted to talk through. The reason that number is, this trajectory is going like this. We have all these programs that are COVID relief programs. We employ a lot of temporary contractor individuals, and after a certain time period, they're eligible for employment, and we transition them if they're a good fit full-time employment. And so we're getting some folks that are a much more diverse workforce, is what I will say, through that, because we have onboarded, I'll talk about this in just a second, a very large number of contractors and temporary employees for these COVID relief programs. And then as we delve into the details of the EEO reporting that we do on a quarterly basis, those classifications of professional and senior manager and executive, we are promoting, as per strategy 4, and identifying folks that can progress through the organization that may have started in one area and ended up as the Deputy Executive Director of Business Services. So I say that something very near and dear to me, and very heartfelt. The opportunity at the corporation here is being expanded, and it's being looked at. And while we do not, we don't have a 28% like Jefferson County, or a 25% like Fayette County. I just want everyone on this call to understand that the commitment to the diversity, equity, and inclusion we have, and we are tracking that and monitoring that and emphasizing that. Last thing I will say about this is you will also see in the February board meeting that I have the privilege of bringing a contract for renewal to continue some diversity, equity, and inclusion training with our staff. So more to come on that, but I wanted to make sure, again, what gets measured gets done, and so we are, as Winston said, we are really trying to put a fine point on some of this information. So the last couple that I have to share with you are successful testing of disaster recovery plan. So that's a big deal, because we have a co-location site, and we have the ability to move and fail over and really like that our systems and be able to accommodate workflow. Our employee services, accounting team, technology services team, since the beginning of July, we've onboarded 43 COVID relief staff, permanent, temporary, and full-time. But since the COVID relief programs started, We've been operating them now almost 16, 17 months, I think. We have onboarded over 150 employees. So we have grown significantly in temporary contractor labor and making sure we're able to administer all these programs. And last but not least, business logistics. There's some key facilities enhancements that have been taking place. We've replaced our entire HVAC system. It's been very much outdated. And this thing called COVID, we've had, we're dealing with that, and we have healthy at work protocols, COVID protocols in place to keep our employees safe and to keep our customers safe. And so I really wanted to shine a light on some of the key accomplishments that each area of the corporation has done and is embarked in or embarked on, and really share the good news that you know, we're working hard and diligently to track, but also perform according to what we set out to do in our overarching strategies. So, any questions? I've got one more slide, and then I'll ask entertain any other questions. But just to give you a sense of where we're going, and I'm speaking of the communications and planning and the program and policy joint committees. As I shared in the timeline earlier, February through April, we're preparing an operating budget, an overarching strategy, scorecards, allocation plan, all of those planning documents. So it's busy for really the corporation in general. It's planning season. All of that to culminate in May with a presentation to this joint committee. The overarching strategies and allocation plan will go to the planning and our policy and program committee, and the overarching strategies will go to the communication planning. And then last but certainly not least, the operating budget, which goes to the finance committee, will be all presented in the May board meeting. May 26th board meeting, and we will likely need to convene prior to that 26th date, more details around that. But that in a nutshell is what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we are doing on what we set out to do in our fiscal 22 corporate strategies. And with that, I'm going to entertain any questions and turn it back over. Are there any questions?
No questions. Wow. Good job.
Oh, I'd like to know how I give my input. I hear Gail's meeting. I want to be on this committee. I'm on this committee. How do I give my input?
Yeah.
Well, after today, you know, the committee will probably meet once again, or Kathy Ryer, you know, get in touch with me. I think you have all my info. So, and John will
100%.
do it together.
100%.
That would be great. Your input is always welcome. Always. So, anybody got anything else to say, talk about? No? Well, I think we need to entertain a motion to accept the report as presented. Somebody like to move that we do that? Make a motion?
I will. Beverly.
Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. Second?
Well, I'll second the report, that the report was presented well and faithfully.
Unfortunately, Kathy's not a member of this committee, so she can't second it.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. I'm not a member of the committee. Okay.
I'll second it if I can, as chairperson.
I think Mr. Mills was raising his hand that he was
Okay.
second.
Thank you, Jeremy. I didn't see. Are there any other items from the board members or the staff? just super kudos to the staff. We've got a great staff. Wendy, John, you all have done a wonderful job under Winston's tutelage, and congratulations for all the hard work that's gone into this, because it continues to be sort of a moving target with everything we have, all the money we have coming in, and it's a first for the corporation. Anybody? Wendy, thank you. John, thank you. Others, thank you all. And any input, be certainly glad to hear it from our group.
Gail, I'm not on the committee, but I don't think you held the vote. I heard.
Yeah, I did.
Yes, you did.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm not trying to skate this one by, Kathy. I'm capable. Do it. All right. So, motion to adjourn.
You're going to be me now? You're going to be me, Gail?
Yeah, I'm going to be you. I'm sorry.
I get to adjourn. No, actually.
I jump ahead. Well, since we reversed our order.
No, I'm joking with you. I don't really care. I will say this before we adjourn. I want to echo your sentiments. John did a fabulous job presenting. I really enjoyed the overarching strategies. I do believe that we live those through our values. And as we move forward, we'll be able to put a lot of this to life. So, I, again, want to say kudos to the staff for all that. Y'all did a heck of a job this year with COVID and everything.
Absolutely.
And also the transition. I don't want to lose sight that we've got a lot of new deputies as well. So Winston's staff has done a fabulous job with COVID in the last couple of years, transitioning and everything. So I'm very pleased to be associated with this.
It's been
I appreciate that comment, and I'd like to join in that comment. I must say that one of the blessings that I had whenever I became the executive director of the Kentucky Housing Corporation was having an excellent staff, executive staff, and managing staff here. And since then, we've transitioned in several respects, and we've been, I think, been very fortunate because we've had such wonderful people to draw on to fill those positions. So we're well positioned from a staff point of view and leadership point of view as we head into this new year. Thanks for that comment.
Absolutely. It's been a challenge for the last 2 years, Winston, and we appreciate what you've done as well. I mean, it's been a rough couple of years. Some of us haven't even met personally.
That's very true.
We haven't had a board meeting.
I can't wait to try out the new air conditioner. Well,
we hopefully will soon. We have new members that have never met many of us face to face under any circumstances. I mean, I know Chad is very new with us, and Beverly has joined us last fall, but I don't think we've met face to face and had that opportunity. And I could name a lot of other people that fit into that position, but we won't. And the numbers are getting better. If we don't have another variant or a wild card in here, maybe by the summer or the fall, we'll be meeting face to face. So keep your fingers crossed.
That would be great.
I apologize for being late for the meeting, but and I don't like to drop names, but I was talking to the governor's office, and so when you're talking to the governor's office, sometimes you don't just sort of say, "I've got to run," and I didn't. So, but I joined us within 5 minutes of being on time. So,
Gail,
again, thank you all.
So, Gail, what Winston's saying is the governor is more important than we are.
I'm shocked. I'm in shock.
We like to make sure everybody feels important. So
everybody's happy.
We appreciate that.
Happy.
Yeah. We appreciate that. So with that, is there any other informational items or anything the staff wants to join in on before we call for adjournment? Hearing silence, which I really liked this day. It's been a rough day so far. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.